You wake up every morning with that familiar weight pressing down on your chest. You know the feeling. It is that silent anxiety that whispers you are not enough, that no matter how hard you work, no matter how many hours you put in, financial freedom remains just beyond your grasp. You pray, you tithe, you do everything you have been taught to do, yet somehow the breakthrough never comes. The bills pile up faster than the solutions. The dreams you once had about building something significant, about leaving a legacy for your children, about finally being able to give generously without counting every penny, those dreams have started to feel like cruel jokes. You have begun to wonder if prosperity is reserved for other people, for those who seem to have some secret knowledge you were never given access to. You lie awake at night calculating and recalculating, trying to make numbers work that simply refuse to cooperate, and in those dark hours, you feel something far worse than financial lack. You feel the creeping sense that maybe you are doing something fundamentally wrong, that perhaps God has not called you to abundance, that struggling is simply your portion in this life. But what if I told you that your struggle is not a sign of divine disfavor, but rather evidence that you have been operating under a spiritual misunderstanding that has kept millions of faithful people trapped in cycles of lack? What if the very anxiety you feel, that persistent sense of never having enough, is not a character flaw or a sign of weak faith, but the result of a specific spiritual force that the Bible identifies clearly and that one of history's wealthiest men learned to overcome? Through a particular psalm, you have been taught to accept struggle as virtue, to wear your financial difficulties like a badge of spiritual honor. But that teaching has robbed you of the very prosperity that God intended as a tool for expanding His kingdom. The religious voices around you have convinced you that wanting wealth is somehow ungodly, that ambition is pride, that the desire to build something significant is vanity, and in accepting these lies, you have surrendered the very mandate God gave humanity from the beginning. John D. Rockefeller understood something that most believers never grasp. He recognized that poverty is not just an economic condition but a spiritual atmosphere, a specific force that the Scriptures call a spirit. And he discovered that this spirit could be broken through the consistent, faithful application of one particular psalm that most Christians read but never truly activate. The transformation I am about to share with you is not theory. It is not motivational fluff designed to make you feel better for a moment before reality crashes back in. This is the actual method that Rockefeller, a man who became the wealthiest person in modern history, used to break free from the spirit of poverty and position himself as a conduit for divine provision. He did not achieve his wealth through luck or exploitation, as history has sometimes portrayed. He achieved it through a deep understanding of spiritual principles that govern prosperity, principles rooted in Scripture, principles that you have access to right now. But understanding these principles requires that you first acknowledge a truth that may make you uncomfortable. You must admit that the spirit of poverty has been operating in your life, whispering lies, creating fear, blocking opportunities, and convincing you that your current state is somehow ordained by God. This spirit is real. It is not a metaphor. The Bible speaks of principalities and powers, of spiritual forces that operate in specific territories and over specific aspects of human experience. And poverty is one of the most ancient and persistent of these forces. It has kept generations of your family limited. It has whispered its deceptions into your mind so consistently that you have begun to believe its voice is your own thoughts. It has convinced you that wanting more is greedy, that building wealth is selfish, that the pursuit of financial freedom is somehow opposed to spiritual growth. These are lies, and they are the very lies that Rockefeller rejected when he began applying the principles found in Psalm 112. Psalm 112 is not merely a beautiful collection of verses to read during difficult times. It is a spiritual weapon, a divine declaration that, when spoken with faith and understanding, breaks the power of poverty over your life and establishes you in a position to receive and steward great wealth for kingdom purposes. Listen to how this psalm begins. Blessed is the man who fears the Lord, who delights greatly in His commandment. His descendants will be mighty on earth. The generation of the upright will be blessed. Wealth and riches will be in his house, and his righteousness endures forever. Do you hear what is being promised here? This is not a suggestion or a hopeful wish. This is a declaration of what happens when you position yourself correctly in relationship to God and His commandment. The psalm explicitly connects the fear of the Lord with generational blessing and with wealth and riches. It does not say that the righteous will scrape by. It does not say they will have just enough. It declares wealth and riches, abundance that extends beyond immediate needs into the capacity to build, to invest, to create, to establish lasting legacy. Rockefeller discovered that this psalm was not just describing a possible outcome, but was actually prescribing a spiritual posture that, when adopted, activated the promises contained within it. He understood that fearing the Lord did not mean cowering in terror, but rather holding God in such reverence that His word became the final authority over every financial decision, every business move, every investment strategy. He delighted greatly in God's commandment, not as burdensome rules but as wisdom principles that govern the universe, and because he positioned himself this way, the promise followed. Wealth and riches were in his house, and his righteousness, his right standing with God based on Christ, endured forever. But here is what most people miss. Rockefeller did not just read this psalm occasionally when he felt discouraged, he activated it daily. He spoke it over his life, over his business, over his finance. He used it to renew his mind against the constant bombardment of poverty, thinking that the world and even religious culture tried to impose on him. He recognized that the spirit of poverty operates primarily through the mind, through the thoughts you think, the beliefs you hold, the automatic assumptions you make about what is possible for you. Before we go any further, I need to pause here because I know exactly what you are feeling right now. You are listening to these words, and something inside you is stirring. Maybe it is hope that you have been afraid to feel because you have been disappointed too many times. Maybe it is anger because you are realizing how long you have been held back by beliefs that were never true. Maybe it is confusion because this message sounds different from what you have been taught in church, and you are wondering if it is safe to believe that God actually wants you wealthy. Whatever you are feeling, I want you to know that I see you. I understand the battle that is happening in your mind right this moment. You have been conditioned to be suspicious of messages about prosperity because you have seen them abused by those who used faith as a manipulation tool. But I am not here to manipulate you. I am here to break chains, and I need your help in this mission. I need to know that what I am sharing is connecting with your reality. So I want to ask you something very specific, and I want you to be brave enough to answer honestly in the comments below. What is the one financial lie you have believed that has kept you stuck? And when did you first start believing it? Maybe it was something a parent said during a moment of frustration. Maybe it was a sermon that equated poverty with piety. Maybe it was a failed business attempt that convinced you that you simply were not meant for financial success. Whatever it is, I want you to type it in the comments right now. Do not overthink it. Just complete this sentence. The financial lie I believed was, and then finish the thought. This is important because naming the lie is the first step in breaking its power. Your honesty will not only help you, it will help thousands of others who are reading these comments and realizing they are not alone in their struggle. This is how we build a community of people who are done with poverty thinking and ready to step into the abundance that God designed for us. So go ahead, pause the video if you need to, and leave that comment right now. Tell me the lie you believe and watch what happens when you expose it to the light. The reason this exercise matters is because the spirit of poverty maintains its power through secrecy and shame. It convinces you that your financial struggles are uniquely yours, that everyone else has it figured out, that you are the only one who lies awake at night wondering how the bills will get paid. But when you speak your truth in the comments, when you see others sharing the same fears and the same lies, something breaks in the spiritual atmosphere. You realize you have been fighting an enemy that attacks millions of people with the same tactics, and suddenly the battle becomes less about your personal inadequacy and more about recognizing and defeating a specific spiritual force. Rockefeller understood this. He understood that poverty is not random. It is strategic. It targets specific people, specific families, specific mindsets, and it uses very predictable methods to keep people trapped. One of its primary weapons is isolation. It wants you to believe you are alone in your struggle. It wants you to be too ashamed to ask for help, too proud to admit you do not have all the answers, too afraid of judgment to share your real financial situation with anyone. But Psalm 112 reveals a different way. It speaks of a man whose descendants will be mighty, whose generation will be blessed. This is not a picture of isolated struggle. This is a picture of generational momentum, of compound blessing. of a family and a community that rises together. Now let us go deeper into what Rockefeller actually did with this psalm and why it worked so powerfully. He did not approach it as a magic formula or a prosperity incantation. He approached it as a spiritual technology, a divine mechanism that, when properly understood and applied, shifted his entire relationship with money. The psalm continues, "Unto the upright there arises light in the darkness. He is gracious and full of compassion and righteous. A good man deals graciously and lends. He will guide his affairs with discretion. Surely he will never be shaken. The righteous will be an everlasting remembrance. He will not be afraid of evil tidings. His heart is steadfast, trusting in the Lord. His heart is established. He will not be afraid until he sees his desire upon his enemies." Pay attention to what is happening in these verses. They are describing a complete transformation of the internal emotional and mental state that most people experience around money. The upright person, the one who has positioned themselves according to the earlier verses, experiences light in darkness. This means that when financial challenges come, and they will come, this person has clarity. They have insight. They have divine wisdom that shows them the path forward when everyone else is panicking. They are not reactive. They are not desperate. They are not controlled by fear. This was Rockefeller's secret. While other businessmen in his era were driven by greed and fear, making impulsive decisions based on market panic or competitive anxiety, Rockefeller operated from a completely different place. He operated from steadfastness. His heart was established. He was not afraid of evil tidings. When others saw economic downturns as disasters, he saw opportunities. When competitors were selling in panic, he was buying strategically. When the crowd was zigging, he was zagging, not out of contrarianism, but out of a deep internal stability that came from trusting in the Lord. And this is what most people completely miss when they study wealthy individuals. They focus on the tactics, the strategy, the business moves, but they ignore the internal foundation that made those moves possible. Rockefeller could make brilliant financial decisions because he was not making them from a place of fear or lack. He was making them from a place of abundance consciousness, from a heart that was steadfast and established, from a mind that had been renewed by consistent meditation on Psalm 112. You need to understand that the spirit of poverty works primarily through fear. It is a spirit of fear disguised as financial pressure. It whispers that you need to hoard, that you need to grasp, that you need to make desperate moves to protect what little you have. It creates an internal atmosphere of scarcity that then manifests as external financial limitation. But Psalm 112 directly confronts this spirit. It declares that the righteous will not be afraid of evil tidings. Think about what that means practically. When an unexpected bill arrives, your first response is not panic. When you lose a client or a job, your initial reaction is not desperation. When an investment goes south, you are not thrown into emotional chaos. Why? Because your heart is steadfast, trusting in the Lord. Your identity is not tied to your current bank balance. Your sense of security is not dependent on your next paycheck. Your peace is not contingent on having everything figured out. You operate from a different foundation entirely, and that foundation makes you dangerous to the kingdom of darkness because you cannot be manipulated through financial fear. Rockefeller applied this practically by establishing certain non-negotiable financial disciplines that flowed from his Psalm 112 consciousness. He committed to giving away a portion of every dollar he earned from the very beginning of his career. This was not tithing out of religious obligation. This was strategic generosity born from abundance thinking. He recognized that the psalm said, "A good man deals graciously and lends," and he understood that this was describing a person who had broken free from scarcity and could therefore operate as a conduit rather than a container. Most people approach money as a container. They see themselves as a bucket that needs to be filled and then protected from anything that might drain it. But Rockefeller saw himself as a conduit, a channel through which resources flowed. Money came to him, yes, but it also flowed through him to fund churches, universities, medical research, and countless other kingdom purposes. And the more it flowed through him, the more came to him. This is a spiritual law that the spirit of poverty desperately does not want you to understand. The law of circulation. Money is like water. It is meant to flow. When you dam it up out of fear, it stagnates and diminishes. When you release it strategically and generously, it increases and multiplies. But here is where most teaching on generosity gets it wrong. Rockefeller was not generous out of guilt or manipulation. He was not giving to get. He was giving from a place of already having. He had already established in his heart and mind that wealth and riches were in his house, not because he had made it happen through his effort, but because Psalm 112 declared it over everyone who fears the Lord and delights in his commandment. He took God at his word. He believed the promise before he saw the manifestation, and that belief changed everything about how he approached business, investment, and money management. When you truly believe that wealth and riches are in your house, not as a future possibility, but as a present reality that is simply unfolding in time, you make completely different decisions. You do not chase opportunities out of desperation. You evaluate them from a place of discernment. You do not say yes to everything. You say no to most things and yes to the few things that align with your purpose and calling. You do not compete. You create. You do not compare yourself to others. You run your own race. You do not worry about who is ahead of you or behind you. You focus on being faithful with what God has put in your hand right now. This brings us to one of the most powerful verses in the entire psalm. He has dispersed abroad. He has given to the poor. His righteousness endures forever. His horn will be exalted with honor. Now this is radical because it is connecting generosity to poor people with lasting honor and exaltation. The world tells you that the way to build wealth is to hoard resources, to maximize profit, to extract as much as possible from every transaction. But Psalm 112 reveals a completely different economy. It says that the person who disperses abroad, who gives to the poor, will have their horn exalted with honor. In biblical language, the horn represents strength, authority, and public influence. This verse is promising that generosity to those in need will result in increased influence and authority in the earth. Rockefeller proved this principle. The more he gave away, the more his influence grew. The more he funded institutions that served the poor and advanced human flourishing, the more his business empire expanded. This was not coincidence. This was spiritual law in operation. He was activating the principles of Psalm 112, and the promises were manifesting exactly as the scripture declared they would. But let us address the elephant in the room. Some of you are thinking, this sounds great, but Rockefeller was a ruthless businessman who crushed competition and built a monopoly. How can you hold him up as an example of biblical prosperity? This is a fair question, and it requires a nuanced answer. Rockefeller was a complex figure who operated in a very different economic era, with different rules and norms. Some of his business practices would not be acceptable today, and I am not here to defend everything he did. However, what I am highlighting is not his business tactics, but his internal spiritual posture toward money, and the specific way he used Psalm 112 to break the spirit of poverty over his life. You can learn from someone's principles without adopting all their methods. You can extract wisdom from their approach to money without excusing every decision they made. The truth is that Rockefeller gave away more money than most people will ever see in their lifetimes. He funded the education of countless individuals. He advanced medical research that saved millions of lives. He built institutions that continue to serve humanity generations after his death. Whatever you think about his business practices, you cannot deny that he understood something about the spiritual laws of prosperity that most believers never tap into. And here is what you need to understand. God is not looking for you to become another Rockefeller. He is looking for you to become the fullest expression of who He created you to be. And that expression requires financial resources. Your calling, whatever it is, has a financial dimension. If you are called to ministry, you need money to support that ministry. If you are called to business, you need capital to build that business. If you are called to raise children, you need resources to provide for them properly and position them for success. If you are called to create art or music or literature, you need financial margin to develop your craft without being crushed by the pressure of survival. The spirit of poverty wants to keep you so financially stressed that you never have the bandwidth to fulfill your actual calling. It wants you working 3 jobs just to make ends meet, so that you never have time to pray, to create, to build, to invest in relationships, to steward the gifts God has put inside you. This is not God's plan for your life. This is the enemy's plan, and Psalm 112 is the weapon that breaks that plan. So how do you actually activate this psalm in your life? How do you move from reading these words to experiencing the transformation they promise? First, you must make a decision that from this day forward, you will no longer agree with the spirit of poverty. You will no longer accept its thoughts as your thoughts. You will no longer allow its fear to dictate your financial decision. This is not a small thing. This is a war declaration. You are announcing to the spiritual realm that you are done with lack, done with limitation, done with the anxiety and stress that comes from poverty consciousness. Second, you must begin to speak Psalm 112 over your life daily, not as a religious ritual, but as a faith declaration. When you wake up in the morning, before you check your bank balance or your bills or your email, you speak this psalm. You declare, I am blessed because I fear the Lord, and delight in His commandment. Wealth and riches are in my house. My righteousness endures forever. I am not afraid of evil tidings. My heart is steadfast, trusting in the Lord. I deal graciously and lend. I guide my affairs with discretion. I am established and will not be shaken. You speak these words not because they feel true in the moment, but because they are true in the spiritual realm, and you are calling those spiritual realities into manifestation in the natural realm. Third, you must align your actions with the principles in the psalm. You cannot speak abundance and live scarcity. You cannot declare that you are not afraid of evil tidings while hoarding every penny out of fear. You cannot claim to deal graciously and lend while refusing to be generous because you might not have enough. The psalm describes a lifestyle, not just a confession. It describes someone who has broken free from poverty thinking and now operates as a steward of divine resources. This means you must begin to make financial decisions from faith rather than fear. You must start giving even when it feels uncomfortable. You must invest in yourself and your future even when the present feels uncertain. You must position yourself around people who think abundantly rather than those who constantly rehearse their financial struggles. You must consume content that builds your faith rather than content that reinforces limitation. You must begin to see yourself the way God sees you, which is as someone designed to prosper and called to be a blessing to many. Fourth, you must develop what I call prosperity habits. These are the small daily actions that compound over time to create massive financial transformation. Rockefeller was famous for his discipline. He tracked every penny. He made thoughtful decisions about where his money went. He did not spend impulsively or emotionally. He created systems that ensured his money was working for him rather than him constantly working for money. You need to do the same. This does not mean you become miserly or obsessed with money. It means you become intentional and strategic. You create a budget not as a restrictive prison, but as a plan for prosperity. You look at your spending and ask, is this moving me toward my goals or away from them? Is this purchase an investment or a distraction? Am I stewarding my resources in a way that honors God and positions me for increase? These questions are not about legalism. They are about stewardship. God gives you resources to manage, and how you manage them determines how much more He can trust you with. Fifth, you must surround yourself with a community that believes in biblical prosperity. The people around you will either pull you up or drag you down. If everyone in your circle is speaking poverty, complaining about lack, rehearsing their financial troubles, and accepting limitation as normal, you will find it nearly impossible to break free. You need to be around people who are building, who are believing God for increase, who are taking faith steps toward their financial goals, who are generous and abundant in their thinking. This is not about abandoning friends who are struggling. It is about making sure that struggle is not the only narrative in your life. You need voices speaking life and possibility and faith. You need examples of people who have broken through. You need to hear testimonies of financial breakthrough so that your mind begins to believe that what happened for them can happen for you. Let me share something that might surprise you. Rockefeller was not born into wealth. He came from a modest background. His father was inconsistent and unreliable. His mother was deeply religious and instilled in him a strong work ethic and faith foundation. From his very first job as a bookkeeper, Rockefeller began applying the principles that would later define his approach to wealth. He gave a portion of his income to his church. He lived below his means. He saved and invested consistently. He made decisions based on long-term thinking rather than short-term pleasure. And he meditated on Scripture, particularly Psalms like Psalm 112, that shaped his understanding of how God viewed prosperity. These were not complex strategies. They were simple disciplines repeated consistently over time. And those simple disciplines, combined with a mind renewed by God's Word, created the foundation for unimaginable wealth. This is available to you, not the exact same outcome, because you are not Rockefeller and you are not called to build Standard Oil, but the same principles, The same spiritual posture, the same breaking of the poverty spirit, the same activation of Psalm 112 consciousness. You can experience this, but you must decide. You must choose to no longer accept the financial limitation that has defined your family for generations. You must reject the religious teaching that told you poverty is somehow noble, or that wanting financial success is carnal. You must recognize that God delights in the prosperity of His servants, and that He has given you everything you need in His Word to break free from the spirit of poverty and step into the abundance He always intended for you. The question is, will you do it? Will you take these principles seriously? Will you speak Psalm 112 over your life daily? Will you align your actions with abundance thinking? Will you begin to give generously even when it feels risky? Will you position yourself for prosperity by developing the habits and mindsets that wealthy people have? I know this is a lot to take in. I know that part of you is excited, and part of you is skeptical, and part of you is afraid to hope because you have been disappointed before. But I want to speak directly to that part of you that is afraid. Your fear is not a sign that this is not for you. Your fear is actually evidence that the spirit of poverty is threatened by what you are hearing right now. That spirit knows that if you truly grasp these principles and begin to apply them, its power over your life is broken. So it is throwing up every objection it can. It is reminding you of past failures. It is whispering that this is too good to be true. It is suggesting that you are not the kind of person who experiences financial breakthrough. But those are lies. They are the same lies that have kept your family limited for generations, and today is the day you break agreement with those lies. Let me paint a picture for you of what your life looks like when you break free from the spirit of poverty and step into Psalm 112 reality. You wake up in the morning without that familiar knot of anxiety in your stomach. You check your bank account, and instead of dread, you feel gratitude because there is more than enough. You get an unexpected bill, and instead of panic, you have peace because you know God is your source, and He always provides. You have margin in your life. You are not constantly stressed about money. You can be generous without calculating. You can take your family on vacation without going into debt. You can give to your church and to causes you believe in without it being a sacrifice that leaves you struggling. You can invest in your future, in your education, in your business, in opportunities that come your way. You can say yes to what God is calling you to do without the constant barrier of not having enough money. Your children grow up seeing a different model of finance. They see generosity and wisdom and abundance thinking. They do not inherit your anxiety. They inherit your faith. They do not repeat your financial mistakes because you broke the cycle. This is not fantasy. This is the promise of Psalm 112 for everyone who will position themselves to receive it. Now I want to talk to you about something that I believe is critical if you are serious about this transformation. You have been listening to this message for a while now, and I know something has shifted in you. I know you feel the truth of what I am saying resonating in your spirit, but feelings fade and motivation is temporary unless it is connected to ongoing input and community. This is why I want to invite you to subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell. Not because I need your subscription, but because you need consistent input if you are going to win this battle against the spirit of poverty. Financial transformation is not a one-time decision. It is a daily practice. It is a continuous renewing of your mind. It is an ongoing alignment of your thoughts, your words, and your actions with the truth of who God says you are and what He says you can have. And that requires you to be in an environment where these truths are being reinforced regularly, where you are hearing testimonies of breakthrough, where you are learning practical strategies, where you are being challenged to think bigger and believe for more. When you subscribe to this channel, you are not just clicking a button. You are making a statement. You are saying, I am done with poverty consciousness, and I am committed to renewing my mind with truth. You are positioning yourself to be part of a community of people who refuse to accept financial limitation as their portion. You are giving yourself access to ongoing teaching that will build your faith and expand your thinking and equip you with practical tools for financial breakthrough. Every video we create is designed to help you break free from the lies that have kept you stuck and step into the abundant life that Jesus died to give you. So if you have been resonating with this message, if you sense that this is a turning point for you, then go ahead right now and hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Make the decision that you are going to be consistent with this, that you are going to keep showing up, that you are going to allow truth to saturate your mind until it completely displaces the lies you have believed. This is not about me building a channel. This is about you building a life, and I want to be part of your journey. Let us go even deeper into Psalm 112, because there is a verse toward the end that often gets overlooked but is absolutely critical to understanding how this psalm breaks the spirit of poverty. The psalm says, "The wicked will see it and be grieved. He will gnash his teeth and melt away. The desire of the wicked shall perish." This is a fascinating verse because it reveals that your prosperity has an effect on the kingdom of darkness. When you break free from poverty and begin to walk in the abundance described in this psalm, it grieves the wicked. It frustrates demonic forces. Why? Because your prosperity is not just about you having a nice life. Your prosperity is about the advancement of God's kingdom. When you have resources, you can fund ministries, you can support missionaries, you can give to the poor, you can invest in kingdom businesses, you can create jobs, you can influence culture, you can leave an inheritance for your children and grandchildren that positions them to do even more for the kingdom than you did. The enemy does not want this. He wants you broke, stressed, anxious, and ineffective. He wants you so consumed with survival that you never get around to living out your purpose. This is why the spirit of poverty is not just about your bank balance. It is about your destiny. It is about what God called you to do in the earth, and whether you will have the resources to do it. Rockefeller understood this. He saw his wealth as a tool for kingdom purpose. Yes, he lived well, but he also gave away more money than most people could imagine. He built institutions that are still changing lives today. He understood that God blesses people to be a blessing, and he took that calling seriously. And this is the mindset shift you must make. You are not pursuing wealth so you can hoard it and live selfishly. You are pursuing wealth because you have a calling that requires resources. You are pursuing prosperity because God has given you a vision that cannot be fulfilled on a poverty budget. You are breaking the spirit of poverty not just for yourself, but for everyone your life will touch, for the generations that will come after you, for the kingdom assignments that are waiting for you on the other side of your financial breakthrough. Some of you right now are thinking, "This all sounds amazing, but where do I start? I am in debt. I have bad credit. I have made so many financial mistakes. How can someone like me possibly experience this kind of transformation?" Let me speak directly to you. Your past does not determine your future. The mistakes you made do not disqualify you from God's promises. The debt you accumulated does not mean you are stuck forever. Psalm 112 does not say, "Blessed is the man who has a perfect financial history and never made a mistake." It says, "Blessed is the man who fears the Lord and delights in his commandments." That can be you starting right now. Today can be day one of a completely different financial story, but it requires you to stop rehearsing your past failures and start declaring your future victories. It requires you to stop defining yourself by your current circumstances and start seeing yourself the way God sees you, which is as someone redeemed, restored, and positioned for increase. Practically, this means you need to do several things. First, you need to get honest about your current financial situation. You cannot change what you do not acknowledge. Write down your debts. Look at your income. Examine your spending. Face the reality without shame or condemnation, but face it. Second, you need to create a plan. Debt elimination is not magic. It is math combined with discipline. You need a budget. You need to cut unnecessary expenses. You need to increase your income if possible. You need to attack your debt strategically, smallest to largest or highest interest to lowest, whatever method works for you, but you need a plan, and you need to work that plan consistently. Third, you need to start giving even while you are in debt. I know this feels counterintuitive, but it is essential. Giving breaks the power of poverty consciousness. It declares that you are not in lack even when circumstances say you are. It positions you as a steward rather than a victim. Start small if you need to, but start. As you honor God with the first fruits of your income, you activate supernatural provision. Fourth, you need to increase your financial intelligence. Read books about money management. Listen to teachings on biblical stewardship. Learn about investing and wealth building. The reason many people stay poor is not because they do not make enough money, but because they do not know how to manage, multiply, and protect what they have. Knowledge is power, especially when it comes to finance. Fifth, you need to change your associations. If everyone around you is broke and comfortable being broke, you will stay broke. Find people who are where you want to be. Get around those who are building wealth, starting business, investing wisely, thinking abundantly. Let their example inspire you and their wisdom guide you. This does not mean you abandon your old friends. It means you intentionally seek out new voices that speak a different message over your life. Now let us address something that might be bothering some of you. You might be thinking, if I focus on building wealth, will I become materialistic? Will I lose my passion for God? Will money corrupt me like it has corrupted so many others? These are valid concerns, but they are based on a false premise. The premise is that money is inherently evil or corrupting. But the Bible does not say money is evil. It says the love of money is the root of all evil. There is a massive difference. Money is a tool. It is neutral. It amplifies whatever is in your heart. If you are generous, money makes you more generous. If you are selfish, money makes you more selfish. If you love God, money gives you more capacity to serve Him. If you love yourself, money feeds your ego. The issue is never the money. The issue is always the heart. This is why Psalm 112 begins with fearing the Lord and delighting in His commandments. The foundation is right relationship with God. When that foundation is secure, wealth becomes a tool for kingdom purposes rather than an idol that destroys you. Rockefeller maintained his faith throughout his life. Despite immense wealth, he remained a committed church member, a faithful giver, and a man who sought to honor God with his resources. Did he do everything perfectly? Of course not. No human does. But his example shows that it is possible to be both wealthy and godly, both successful and faithful, both prosperous and generous. You do not have to choose between serving God and building wealth. In fact, serving God often requires that you build wealth because kingdom work requires resources. Souls are not reached, churches are not built, missionaries are not sent, and the poor are not fed with good intentions alone. These things require money, and someone needs to generate that money. Why not you? Why not position yourself to be one of the financiers of the kingdom, one of the people who makes it possible for others to fulfill their calling because you provided the resources they needed? I want to shift gears for a moment and talk about one of the most powerful aspects of Psalm 112 that directly addresses the mental and emotional battle you face with money. The psalm says, "He will not be afraid of evil tidings. His heart is steadfast, trusting in the Lord." Do you realize what this means? This is describing someone who has completely broken free from financial anxiety. Think about how much of your mental and emotional energy is consumed by worry about money. You worry about whether you will have enough. You worry about unexpected expenses. You worry about losing your job. You worry about the economy. You worry about your retirement. You worry about your kids' education. You worry about medical bills. The list is endless, and that worry is exhausting. It drains your joy. It steals your peace. It affects your relationships. It impacts your health. It robs you of the abundant life that Jesus promised. But Psalm 112 reveals that there is another way to live, a way where your heart is steadfast, not shaken by circumstances, not controlled by external conditions, not at the mercy of the next financial challenge. How do you develop this kind of steadfastness? It comes from trusting in the Lord, which means you have transferred your confidence from your job, your savings, your investments, your hustle, and placed it fully in God as your source. This does not mean you become passive or irresponsible. It means you do your part with excellence while recognizing that ultimately your provision comes from God. He is the one who gives you the ability to create wealth. He is the one who opens doors no man can shut. He is the one who provides opportunities at just the right time. He is the one who protects what you have and multiplies it beyond what seems possible. When you truly grasp this, financial challenges become less threatening, not because you are ignoring reality, but because you know that reality is bigger than what you can see with your natural eyes. You know that God is working behind the scene. You know that He has promised to supply all your needs according to His riches in glory. You know that if He takes care of the birds of the air and the flowers of the field, He will certainly take care of you. Rockefeller exemplified this kind of trust. During economic panics when other businessmen were selling everything in fear, he remained calm and made strategic investments that multiplied his wealth exponentially. He could do this because his heart was steadfast. He was not making decisions from a place of panic, but from a place of faith. He trusted that God, who had brought him this far, would continue to guide and provide. This is the level of confidence that Psalm 112 offers you. But to access it, You must do the work of renewing your mind. You must saturate your thoughts with God's Word until His promises become more real to you than your circumstances. You must speak truth over yourself, even when your bank account is speaking a different message. You must choose faith over fear every single day until faith becomes your default response to financial challenges. Let me give you a practical exercise that will help you begin to develop this steadfast heart. Every time you feel anxiety about money rising in your chest, I want you to pause and speak Psalm 112 out loud. Do not just think it, speak it. There is power in the spoken word. When you speak scripture over your situation, you are not just reminding yourself of truth. You are releasing spiritual authority. You are shifting the atmosphere around you. You are declaring God's word over the enemy's lies. And as you do this consistently, you will notice something changing inside you. The anxiety will begin to lose its grip. The fear will start to fade. The steadfastness will take root. It does not happen overnight, but it does happen. Your mind is being renewed. Your heart is being established. And that internal transformation will inevitably lead to external manifestation. Now I want to address the final verse of Psalm 112, because it ties everything together in a powerful way. The psalm ends by contrasting the righteous person with the wicked. It says the wicked will see your prosperity and be grieved, gnashing their teeth and melting away, while their desires perish. This is a picture of complete victory. Not just financial victory, but spiritual victory. You have broken free from the spirit of poverty. You are walking in the abundance that God intended. You are stewarding resources with wisdom and generosity. You are funding kingdom purposes. You are leaving a legacy. And those who operate under the kingdom of darkness, who wanted to keep you limited and ineffective, are grieved because their plan failed. They could not keep you in poverty. They could not stop your breakthrough. They could not prevent your prosperity. And now you are a threat to their agenda because you have resources to advance God's kingdom. This is the place I want you to get to. Not just having money, but having money with purpose. Not just being debt-free, but being positioned to build generational wealth. Not just getting by, but thriving and overflowing. Not just taking care of yourself, but being able to be radically generous. This is what Psalm 112 promises, and this is what the spirit of poverty has been fighting to prevent in your life. But today, that spirit loses. Today, you make a decision that changes everything. Today, you break agreement with poverty and step into the prosperity that God has been trying to get to you for years. You have been blocked. You have been hindered. You have been under attack. But no more. From this day forward, you are a Psalm 112 person. You fear the Lord. You delight in His commandment. Wealth and riches are in your house. You are not afraid of evil tidings. Your heart is steadfast, trusting in the Lord. You deal graciously and lend. You guide your affairs with discretion. You are established and will not be shaken. Speak this over yourself right now. Say it out loud. I am a Psalm 112 person. The spirit of poverty is broken over my life. I walk in divine prosperity. I am blessed to be a blessing. Wealth and riches are in my house. My heart is steadfast, trusting in the Lord. I will not be afraid. I am established. I will not be shaken. Say it again and again. Let it sink deep into your spirit. Let it become the truth you believe more than any circumstance you are facing. Let it be the declaration that shifts your financial reality from this day forward. You are not the same person you were when you started listening to this message. Something has broken. Something has shifted. Something has been activated. The wisdom and revelation in Psalm 112 that Rockefeller used to break the spirit of poverty and build immense wealth is now working in your life. You have the same access to the same spiritual principle. You serve the same God who delights in prospering His servants. And now you know the truth. And the truth is making you free. Let me share with you something that will help you understand why this psalm is so transformational when properly applied. Throughout history, there have been men and women who discovered specific scriptures that became keys to unlock dimensions of provision and blessing that most people never experience. Psalm 112 is one of those keys, but it is not the words alone that carry power. It is the posture of heart that these words create when you meditate on them consistently. When Rockefeller read that wealth and riches would be in his house, he did not read it as wishful thinking or as a nice sentiment. He read it as a legal document from heaven, a binding promise from God that could not fail as long as he maintained his part of the covenant, which was to fear the Lord and delight in His commandment. This is where most people miss the mark. They want the promise without the prerequisite. They want wealth and riches without fearing the Lord. They want abundance without delighting in His commandment. But that is not how spiritual law works. The promises of God are always connected to conditions, not because God is trying to make things difficult, but because the conditions are what position you to receive and steward what He wants to give. If you received massive wealth while still operating with a poverty mindset, that wealth would destroy you. It would amplify your insecurities. It would expose your lack of character. It would reveal that you were not ready for what you were asking for. But when you fear the Lord and delight in His commandments, you are being transformed from the inside out. You are developing the character that can handle wealth without being corrupted by it. You are cultivating the wisdom that can multiply resources rather than squander them. You are building the spiritual foundation that makes you a safe steward of God's resources. Rockefeller understood this deeply. He was not just chasing money. He was pursuing the character and wisdom that would make him worthy of managing great wealth for kingdom purposes. He spent time in prayer. He studied Scripture. He sought counsel from godly men. He made decisions based on principles rather than emotions. He played the long game while everyone around him was making short-term moves. And because he did these things consistently, over decades, he positioned himself to become the wealthiest man in modern history. But here is what is even more important. He also positioned himself to give away more money than any person had ever given away before. His generosity funded the establishment of the University of Chicago, Rockefeller University, and countless other institutions that continue to serve humanity today. His medical research funding led to breakthroughs that saved millions of lives. His educational initiatives opened doors of opportunity for people who would have never had access otherwise. This is the fruit of Psalm 112 properly applied. Not just personal wealth, but generational impact. Now I want you to think about your own life for a moment. What would change if you truly broke free from the spirit of poverty? And I am not just talking about having more money in your bank account, although that would certainly change. I am talking about the internal liberation that comes when you are no longer controlled by fear, anxiety, and scarcity thinking. Imagine waking up every day with a sense of peace about your finance. Imagine being able to make decisions based on what is right rather than what is affordable. Imagine having the margin to invest in your health, your relationships, your personal development, your spiritual growth. Imagine being able to say yes when God prompts you to give to someone in need without having to calculate whether you can afford it. Imagine funding mission trips, supporting ministries, helping family members, creating opportunities for others. Imagine leaving an inheritance for your children and grandchildren that gives them a head start in life. Imagine breaking the cycle of poverty that has plagued your family for generations. This is not fantasy. This is the promise of Psalm 112. This is what happens when you position yourself correctly in relationship to God and His Word. But let me be very clear about something. This is not a get-rich-quick scheme. This is not about finding some shortcut or loophole that allows you to bypass the process of growth and development. Rockefeller built his wealth over decades through discipline, wisdom, hard work, and strategic thinking. He did not become wealthy overnight. He became wealthy through consistent application of principles over an extended period of time. And the same will be true for you. When you begin to apply Psalm 112 to your life, you are not going to wake up tomorrow as a millionaire, but you will wake up with a different mindset. You will start making different decisions. You will begin to see opportunities that you were previously blind to. You will develop habits that compound over time. You will attract relationships that open doors. You will steward what you have in a way that creates multiplication. And year after year, as you remain faithful to the process, you will look back and be amazed at how far you have come. This is why I emphasize daily declaration of Psalm 112. You are not just speaking words into the air. You are reprogramming your subconscious mind. You are replacing the poverty scripts that have been running in the background of your thinking with prosperity scripts based on God's Word. Your subconscious mind does not care whether something is true or false. It simply accepts what you repeatedly tell it and then works to make that your reality. If you repeatedly tell yourself that you are broke, that you will never get ahead, that money is hard to come by, that rich people are evil, that you are not good with finance, then your subconscious mind will find ways to make those beliefs true in your experience. It will cause you to overlook opportunity. It will prompt you to make decisions that keep you stuck. It will attract circumstances that confirm your beliefs. But when you repeatedly speak Psalm 112 over yourself, you are telling your subconscious mind a different story. You are declaring that you are blessed, that wealth and riches are in your house, that you are not afraid, that your heart is steadfast, that you are established, and your subconscious mind, being the faithful servant that it is, will begin to look for ways to make this new reality true. It will heighten your awareness of opportunities. It will give you courage to take action. It will connect you with the right people at the right time. It will guide you toward decisions that align with prosperity. This is not New Age manifestation teaching. This is biblical meditation properly understood. The Bible tells us to meditate on God's Word day and night. It tells us to hide His Word in our hearts. It tells us to let the Word of Christ dwell in us richly. It tells us that we are transformed by the renewing of our minds. All of these instructions are pointing to the same principle. What you consistently focus on and speak about shapes your reality. If you focus on lack, you experience lack. If you focus on abundance, you experience abundance. If you speak poverty, you create poverty. If you speak prosperity based on God's promises, you create prosperity. This is why the spirit of poverty works so hard to control your thoughts and your words. It knows that if it can keep you thinking and speaking limitation, it can keep you experiencing limitation. But when you break free from its mental and verbal control by saturating your mind with Psalm 112, you cut off its access to your life. You close the door it has been using to keep you trapped. You establish a new pattern that leads to breakthrough. Let me give you a specific 30-day challenge that will help you activate these principles in a tangible way. For the next 30 days, I want you to do 3 things every single day without exception. First, read Psalm 112 out loud before you do anything else in the morning. Not silently, out loud. Let your ears hear your voice speaking God's promises over your life. Second, write down one thing you are grateful for financially, no matter how small. Maybe you are grateful that you have food in your refrigerator. Maybe you are grateful for a job even if it is not your dream job. Maybe you are grateful for a roof over your head. Gratitude is a powerful antidote to poverty thinking because it shifts your focus from what you lack to what you have. Third, take one action toward financial wisdom each day. Maybe you read a chapter of a book about money. Maybe you create a budget. Maybe you call a creditor to negotiate a payment plan. Maybe you research an investment opportunity. Maybe you cut one unnecessary expense from your spending. Maybe you increase your income by taking on a side project. The action does not have to be big. It just has to be intentional and consistent. If you will do these 3 things every day for 30 days, I promise you that something will shift. You will not be the same person at the end of 30 days that you are right now. Your mind will be different. Your expectations will be different. Your actions will be different. And different actions produce different results. Here is what else happens when you consistently apply Psalm 112. You start to notice that God orders your steps in ways you did not orchestrate. You run into someone who mentions a job opportunity you did not know existed. You get an idea for a business or a side income stream that you had never considered before. You receive an unexpected check in the mail. You get a promotion or raise that you were not anticipating. You find money you forgot you had. You are given something you were about to buy. A debt is forgiven. An investment performs better than expected. These are not coincidences. These are what I call divine alignment. They are the result of you positioning yourself in the flow of God's provision by aligning your heart, your mind, and your actions with His Word. When you are in alignment, things start to happen for you that you cannot make happen through your own effort. Doors open that you did not knock on. Opportunities come to you instead of you having to chase them. Favor surrounds you like a shield. This is what it means to be blessed. It is not just that you work hard and things work out. It is that God supernaturally intervenes in your circumstances to cause things to work out in ways that defy natural explanation. Rockefeller experienced this consistently. There are numerous accounts of how he would be at the right place at the right time to make a deal that would multiply his wealth exponentially, how he would have insight into market movements that others missed, how he would make decisions that seemed risky at the time but turned out to be brilliant in hindsight. This was not luck. This was a man who had positioned himself to hear from God and to be guided by divine wisdom. And the same is available to you. When your heart is steadfast and trusting in the Lord, You are not just relying on your own understanding. You are tapping into infinite wisdom. You have access to the mind of Christ. You can hear the still small voice that directs your steps and warns you of danger and points you toward opportunity. But you will not hear that voice clearly if your mind is cluttered with poverty thinking, fear, and anxiety. You will not recognize divine direction if you are so focused on your problems that you cannot see the solutions God is trying to show you. This is why the internal work is so critical. This is why renewing your mind with Psalm 112 is not optional. It is essential. Now let me address something that I know some of you are wrestling with. You might be thinking, I have prayed for financial breakthrough before, and nothing happened. I have believed God for provision, and been disappointed. What makes this different? Why should I believe that Psalm 112 will work for me when other things have not? This is a fair question, and it deserves an honest answer. The difference is not in God. God has always been ready and willing to prosper you. The difference is in you, and specifically in your level of understanding and application. Most people approach financial breakthrough as a one-time prayer request. They ask God for money when they are in crisis, and when He does not drop cash from heaven immediately, they conclude that He is not interested in their finances or that prosperity is not for them. But that is not how biblical prosperity works. Biblical prosperity is the result of positioning yourself according to spiritual principles and then stewarding what God gives you with wisdom and faithfulness. It is a process, not an event. It is a journey, not a destination. Psalm 112 works because it addresses the root issues that create poverty. It deals with your relationship with God, your mindset, your beliefs, your actions, your character. When these things are aligned, prosperity is the natural result. Think of it this way. If you plant an apple seed in good soil, give it water and sunlight, protect it from pests, and provide the right conditions, what happens? An apple tree grows. This is not a miracle. This is natural law. The seed has the potential for a tree built into it. All it needs is the right environment and conditions to activate that potential. The same is true with prosperity. God has placed the potential for wealth creation inside you. He has given you talents, abilities, creativity, intelligence, and resourcefulness. But if that seed is planted in the soil of poverty thinking, if it is watered with words of lack, if it is exposed to the harsh elements of fear and doubt, it will not produce the harvest it is capable of. Psalm 112 creates the right environment. It is the good soil. It is the water and sunlight. It is the protection from pests. When you meditate on this psalm daily, you are cultivating the conditions that allow the seed of prosperity that God placed in you to grow and produce fruit. But here is where many people get stuck. They want the fruit without the cultivation. They want harvest without planting and watering and waiting. They want to skip the process and jump straight to the result. But that is not how any of this works. Even Rockefeller, with all his wisdom and discipline, did not become wealthy overnight. He started as a 16-year-old bookkeeper making less than $4 a week, but he was faithful with that $4. He gave a portion to God. He saved a portion for the future. He lived on less than he made, and he consistently applied the principles that would eventually make him incredibly wealthy. If he had despised small beginnings, if he had waited until he had more money to start being disciplined, if he had consumed everything he earned instead of saving and investing, he never would have built the foundation that allowed him to take advantage of opportunities when they came. This is a critical point. Your breakthrough is not going to come while you are being unfaithful with what you currently have. It is going to come as you prove yourself faithful with little, so that God can trust you with much. Jesus taught this principle clearly in the parable of the talents. The servants who were faithful with what they were given received more. The servant who buried his talent and did nothing with it lost even what he had. This is a spiritual law. Faithfulness in small things leads to greater things. But most people are waiting for the greater things before they will be faithful with the small things. They say, when I make more money, I will start tithing. When I have extra, I will start saving. When I get that promotion, I will start being generous. But that is backward thinking. You start tithing with your current income so that God can bless and increase your income. You start saving from what you have now so that you develop the habit that will serve you when you have more. You start being generous with the little you possess so that you prove to God that He can trust you with greater resources. Faithfulness precedes increase. Stewardship precedes multiplication. If you will not manage $10 wisely, why would God give you $10,000? If you cannot be disciplined with a small income, How will you handle a large income? The issue is never the amount. The issue is always the stewardship. This is why Psalm 112 is so powerful. It describes someone who guides their affairs with discretion. This means they are thoughtful, intentional, and strategic with their resources. They are not impulsive. They are not reckless. They are not driven by emotion or comparison or the need to impress others. They make decisions based on wisdom and long-term thinking. They ask questions like, will this purchase move me closer to my goals or further away? Is this an investment or an expense? Am I buying this because I need it or because I want to feel better about myself? Is this the best use of my resources right now? These may seem like small questions, but they are the questions that separate those who build wealth from those who stay broke. Wealthy people think differently about money. They see it as a tool to be deployed strategically rather than a commodity to be consumed immediately. They delay gratification. They make sacrifices now for benefits later. They understand that every dollar has an opportunity cost, and they choose to invest rather than spend whenever possible. Let me give you a practical example. Imagine you have $100. You could spend that $100 on entertainment, eating out, or buying something you do not really need. That would give you temporary pleasure, but no lasting value. Or you could invest that $100 in your financial education by buying a book or course that teaches you skills that increase your income. That investment might not feel as immediately satisfying as spending the money on pleasure, but it could lead to you earning thousands of extra dollars over the coming months and years. Or you could use that $100 to start a small side business that generates additional income streams. The person who consistently chooses investment over consumption is the person who builds wealth over time. This is not about depriving yourself. This is about delaying gratification for greater rewards. This is about thinking like a steward rather than a consumer. This is about recognizing that the decisions you make today with small amounts of money are creating the patterns that will determine what you do with large amounts of money in the future. Rockefeller was legendary for his attention to detail and his insistence on knowing where every penny went. He kept meticulous records. He analyzed his spending. He looked for inefficiencies and eliminated them. He negotiated better deals. He found ways to reduce costs without sacrificing quality. He treated every dollar as if it mattered because he understood that it did. And this level of intentionality is what allowed him to accumulate and multiply wealth in ways that seemed impossible to others. But it all started with small disciplines practiced consistently. He did not become a billionaire by making one brilliant move. He became a billionaire by making thousands of wise decisions over decades. And each of those decisions was informed by the principles he learned from Scripture, particularly from Psalm 112. Now I want to speak to those of you who are feeling overwhelmed right now. Maybe you are thinking, I am so far behind. I have so much debt. I have made so many mistakes. I am too old to start over. I do not have the education, or the connections, or the opportunities. Let me tell you something that is absolutely true. God specializes in impossible situations. He delights in taking what the world has written off and turning it into something beautiful and productive. Your age is not a barrier. Your past is not a disqualification. Your current circumstances are not your permanent address. The same God who brought the children of Israel out of slavery in Egypt and into the Promised Land is able to bring you out of financial bondage and into prosperity. The same God who provided manna in the wilderness when there was no natural source of food is able to provide for you in ways you cannot imagine. The same God who multiplied a widow's oil and a boy's lunch is able to multiply what you have in your hand right now. But you have to give him something to multiply. You have to take a step of faith. You have to do something different than what you have been doing. You cannot keep thinking the same thoughts, speaking the same words, and taking the same actions while expecting different results. That is the definition of insanity. Change requires change. Transformation requires you to be transformed. Breakthrough requires you to break through the limitations that have held you back. And that breakthrough starts with making a decision. Right now, in this moment, you must decide that enough is enough. You must decide that you are done accepting poverty as your portion. You must decide that you are going to apply the principles in Psalm 112 regardless of how you feel or what your circumstances look like. You must decide that you are going to trust God's word more than your bank balance. You must decide that you are going to speak life over your finance instead of death. You must decide that you are going to be a good steward of what you have so that God can trust you with more. This decision is the turning point. Everything changes from here, but you have to make the decision. No one can make it for you. Not me, not your pastor, not your spouse, not your friends. This is between you and God. And when you make this decision from a place of genuine faith and commitment, heaven responds, angels are dispatched, doors begin to open, opportunities start to appear, divine connections are made, wisdom is downloaded, ideas come, strategies emerge, things start to shift. Not because you are manipulating God, but because you have positioned yourself in alignment with His will and His word, and that alignment releases His power in your life. As we close, I want to leave you with a final challenge. Do not let this message be something you heard and forgot. Let it be something you apply and experience. Take Psalm 112 and make it your daily declaration. Write it out and put it where you will see it every morning. Speak it over your finances, your business, your investments, your family. Let it renew your mind and reshape your beliefs about money, and then align your actions with what you are declaring. Give generously. Manage wisely. Invest strategically. Pursue excellence. Build relationships with people who think abundantly. Increase your financial intelligence. Create systems that ensure your money is working for you. Be patient with the process, but persistent in your faith. Financial transformation does not happen overnight, but it does happen for those who apply these principles consistently. You are on the verge of a breakthrough that will not only change your life, but will impact generations after you. The spirit of poverty is broken. The chains are off. The door is open. Now you must walk through it. You must step into the abundant life that has been waiting for you. God is ready. The resources are available. The question is, are you ready? Are you willing to believe for more? Are you willing to break free from the limitation that has defined your family for generations? Are you willing to become the person who changes your family tree forever? I believe you are. I believe this message found you at exactly the right time because heaven has orchestrated this moment. Your breakthrough is not coming. It is here. It is now. Receive it. Walk in it. And watch what God does as you apply the principles of Psalm 112 that broke the spirit of poverty over Rockefeller and can break it over you. Go in peace. Go in power. Go in prosperity. Your season of lack is over. Your season of abundance has begun.